Well, it's time for another Azur Lane analysis video. A lot later than I should have done it, considering it's now nearly 2 months since the event ended, but alas, better late than never. As always, I hope you enjoy this video too and learn something from it. A note through Firmament starts with us being called to the Sea of Stars, where a surprise waits for us. An experiment that might finally allow us to cure Lexington and give her Type 2 rigging, just how we've done for Yorktown before. Yet as the experiment begins, something weird happens. We're pulled into a different dimension. A recreation of Alpha Timeline, where we immediately meet with Lexington, already donning a Type 2 rigging. Yet more surprising, it seems to turn out that the war against X in this timeline simply seems to have been a mass dream and not a reality. And unlike other recreations of Alpha Timeline before, this recreation is absolutely complete, or at least seems to be. There's no limits to it, nor does anything seem to be out of place. It's perfectly peaceful, and Lexington has enough money to buy an apartment and food for us to peacefully stay in this timeline. And that way, we spend a few days in this timeline without problems and share our time with Lexington. Yet, with time, we also have suspicions, and when the time comes, we gather with others in Anchorage, Alaska. We meet a lot of people, not just ship girls, but even all the council members and the arbiters, or at least the vessels. The council comes to the conclusion that this timeline is real, and not just some simulation or dream. Despite this, they support us, the commander, in all our actions. And as such, when a special day comes, we traverse up the observatory in the city, which leads us to meeting with Helena Meta. Here we learn that Helmet has taken over the Arbiter's test site Theta, and has by some scheme acquired some of Arbiter's authority and an important part of her technology, the Veil. The Veil can seemingly keep a test site safe from the X. She claims she has created a perfect world, but we call her out on it, mentioning that despite her claims of this being a perfect world, it's already slowly falling apart, and a world without Helmet cannot be perfect. In this moment, Helmet offers us a choice: help her or reject her and return to test site Beta, letting the created Alpha timeline come to an end. If we accept her and help her, the story comes to an end. The new Alpha timeline keeps going for as long as we can keep it going. If we reject her, we get to return to test site Beta, with Lexington now having a Type 2 rigging. But this is only the first part of the story. In the second part of the story, we rush back into test site Theta to rescue Helena Meta. There, we finally see test site Theta in its original form and fight back against the few mimic beasts that invade the test site. With the help of the Arbiters, we relocate the test site to keep it safe from the X. Yet, we also learn that once test site Theta is moved, Helmet will have to leave us, because to enact her plan, Helmet is sent into a higher dimension. It's only by anchoring herself to test site Theta that she can interact with us, and by moving it, we have caused Helmet to lose her anchor, and she leaves any plane of existence we could interact with her. Now, while this is technically the analysis section, there's not a lot to dig deep into regarding this event. It's pretty straightforward, and most of the story shows us the personality of different characters. Helmet shows a devotion to not only us, but a desire for peace for everyone. The commander shows once more his resolve for true peace, not a peace that costs a sacrifice of even one shipgirl. He will leave no shipgirl behind. Lexington shows us just how much she cares for everyone, even if it costs her life, as we learn about her repeated rejections and delays for her Type 2 rigging and letting others go before her in Alpha Timeline, which ultimately costs her her life. Even when Helmet points out that this newly recreated Alpha timeline allows Lexington to live after she gave up her life for others, Lexington accepts the reality of her death, knowing that she cannot keep the others trapped in this world just to keep living. Due to its peaceful nature, that's the most we can really get out of it for the most part. If there's one thing we can analyze here, it's the end of the story. The extra notes to be specific. Now, these are massive spoilers if you haven't read the event completely through, and a lot of it is my own theory and interpretation, so take everything with a grain of salt that I'm about to say. At the end, we see how the Arbiter of the tower seemingly deletes Observer Zero and takes over the Arbiter system. Weirdly enough, Zero doesn't seem to react or even acknowledge the reality of what happens. She doesn't seem to do anything while the tower attacks her. Weirdly enough. Why is that? Now, this is my assumption, but my belief is that the Observer Zero we see is not the actual Observer Zero, and that the actual Observer Zero is elsewhere, or at least Observer Zero let herself be deleted because she had backup. My reason for thinking this is the existence of TB, and more important, the fact that we saw a tiny TB in the classroom that the magician created. This tiny TB even tried to warn us about the tower during To a Brighter World. As such, I believe it is very unlikely for Observer Zero to just stand by and let the tower do what she wants. This tiny TB, Zero, was far more emotional than anything we saw from the Zero that the tower deleted, which makes me very confident in the fact that Zero is hiding her true self somewhere. Where she's hiding herself, I have multiple ideas. Number 1. The most simple answer is that Observer Zero has a backup that is hiding inside the classroom of a magician. It's where we saw her act the most and where she was very emotive and even interact with us slightly. So I believe, as it stands, this is the most likely answer. Number 2. Observer Zero is hiding herself in the TB of Test Site Beta. This is a more outlandish idea, but if we consider the fact that TB and the Galactic Core are absent in the Brighter World, then it makes sense to consider these things as outside of Test Site Beta, meaning that TB is not really part of Test Site Beta and as such very likely could be Observer Zero. This is less likely than the first possibility, but I still think it might be a real possibility. Number 3. The TB from a poor timeline is the real Observer Zero. This is probably the least likely version, but it's by far the most interesting one, even if it relies on far more assumptions than the other two theories. Firstly, we rely on the assumption that the poor timeline is similar to the Brighter World, an isolated garden. This assumption hinges on the last Tempesta event, and how the commander of that timeline referred to the boundaries of his world getting weaker. It's very reminiscent of a garden analogy that was used for the Brighter World, but interestingly enough, unlike the Brighter World, TB still exists in the poor timeline. Why and how if it's an isolated garden? Because Observer Zero has inserted herself deliberately into this timeline. We have to remember that TB is powered by the Galactic Core in the Sea of Stars in Test Site Beta. But in Port Timeline, we see no such installation and TB exists. Very weird, wouldn't you say? Yet what we do know exists in Port Timeline is the Virtual Tower. Something that looks very much like a Siren mainframe. Yet there's no Siren present for said mainframe, nor do the ship girls seem to even know what this Virtual Tower is. Which is weird, because Purity seems well aware of what Arbiters are, she's even aware of what the DOS are. This is exactly what leads me to believe that Port Timeline is like the Brighter World, but with a far more permissive border. And this isolated garden was potentially created by Observer Zero as her own private world. Even the words of Dana L at the end of Data Life collab seem to imply that Port Timeline is less of a free, independent timeline and is in fact preordained, e.g. it's a pruned garden. As you can probably see, there's a lot of assumptions I'm making here, from assuming what the Virtual Tower is, to assuming that the Port Timeline is an isolated garden, to assuming how TB works in the Port Time. This is a lot of assumptions, which is why I think while this is the most interesting theory, it's the least likely one. But not the last one, I still have one more. Number 4. All of the before mentioned theories carry part of the truth, as they are all Observer Zero. As we know, Arbiters have multiple mainframes and are far from limited to just a single one like normal lower level Sirens. As such, I think it's very possible that similarly, all the different forms of TB are in fact a part of Observer Zero, and the Observer Zero we saw at the end of A Note Through Firmament was just another fragment. I think this is a bit more likely than the previous theory, but still less likely than the first two. This was a lot less an analysis regarding A Note Through a Firmament than it was one for the fate of Observer Zero and the future story. I apologize for that, but if you listen to my summary of A Note Through a Firmament, you have gotten essentially the most important parts of the story. Unlike a dance from Amahara Above or Memories and Echo, there wasn't really any hidden story beat. The event was unusually straightforward in regards to Azur Lane storytelling, everything was clearly explained, nothing was hidden, which I think was probably the intention of the story. It was a story about laying things out as they are. Nothing needs to be hidden anymore since the mental prison of Amahara was destroyed. Anyway, I still hope you enjoyed the video and will be here when I do the analysis for the next big event, which hopefully will not take 2 months until after the event again.